Hi, and welcome to this week's Wu Wei Wisdom Life Lessons teaching. It's great to be back with you all. This week is part 3 of our Inner Child mini-series, where we are going back to basics to help you understand the foundational principles and teachings related to the inner child work, and inner child healing. We have a huge back catalogue of inner child teachings on our YouTube channel. So if you'd like to delve a lot deeper into this subject, I will put a link in the show notes so you can access those teachings. But today we are answering the question, how do I connect with my inner child? Okay, David, so what does connecting to our inner child actually mean?
I think in my model, the way that I would explain it is what I try and say on every video, Alex. You are the creator of your emotions. You are not the victim. So the way you connect to your inner child is stop being the victim of your emotions. Stop using your emotions as your base. Stop classing yourself as being anxious or scared or frightened, because that's the part of the mind when you experience those red light feelings. That's the part of the mind that we've got to connect to, because that part of the mind is screaming out. It wants some help. It's stuck.
So what you're suggesting is, rather than just run along with or follow without question our red light emotions, which are normally generated by our out of balance inner child, which is what we talked about in our last teaching, you're suggesting take a different path and connect and start to have a conversation with the inner child and start to question what exactly is wrong with it.
Okay, I can never be 100%, but I'm going to say every time you experience fear, being scared, anxiousness, an extreme red light feeling, that is the part of the mind that we are calling the inner child, screaming out for attention, for help, for guidance, for education. That's how it's getting your attention. So rather than looking at it as being the victim of these emotions and going and medicating or eating too much or drinking too much or avoiding life, this is what I want to try and teach you, is turn that around and become genuinely interested on what is the basis, what's the core of those emotions.
Okay, David. So if we are trying this inner child connection work, the inner child healing work, the inner child reparenting work for the first time, in kind of little tiny baby steps, what are the first things we could try to do in order to do this work?
So this is what we would call the golden thread process. It's very simple. You don't need anyone else to do this. You can do it for yourself. As I said, I'm going to repeat again. You start at the top with your emotional feelings. You think about it. Who or what is creating these emotional feelings? Now, normally the answer will be, well, it's them. They make me feel. They trigger me. They do this. If it wasn't for that, if it wasn't for this, and you see what you're doing, then you're pushing all of the responsibility outside of yourself, and you become the victim of circumstances, or you become the victim of the person. So that's why that teaching I try and do on every video is so important. You are the creator of your emotions. You are not the victim. So when you accept that fully and you experience, and I'm not underestimating how powerful these emotional experiences are for you, I know they are absolutely intense, then you acknowledge that I am now experiencing a red light feeling. I would advise you not to give it a name like anxiety, fear, scared, overwhelmed. Don't give it those names, because all you're doing is you're whipping it up even more, and you're making it even stronger. Just call it a red light and say, now let me find out why I am creating this red light emotion. That's the beginning of the golden thread.
Can I just stop you there just so I'm clear on something, David? You're saying own the emotions and that you're creating them, but accept that you're not creating the external situation.
Nope.
So you're not responsible for what that other person's doing
Or saying or whatever.
you're not responsible for this challenging situation. So it's not a case of we're not blaming ourselves for the problem. We're just taking back responsibility for our emotions and the fact that we are creating, therefore we can manage them and we can control them.
Thank you for clearing up that. That's exactly what I am not saying. I am not saying you are responsible for the situation or for what the person said, but I am saying do not give them the power to control you. That's what I am saying. And why I'm saying is that emotion that you create, and again, I'm going to clarify before we get down the golden thread, I am not saying you should not experience emotions. So for those of you going to write in and say, oh, you're saying we shouldn't have emotions, I'm not saying that. I'm saying emotions are natural, normal, wonderful.
And can be helpful.
And can be extremely helpful. What's better than the emotion of love? But you create it. And that's what I'm saying. So I'm not saying you shouldn't create it. I'm not saying that be emotionless. I'm not saying that. Be stoic. Somebody wrote in and said, oh, you're telling me to be stoic. I'm not. I'm saying, who creates the emotion? You or somebody else? How do emotions flow through the air? Do they come in like an arrow? Do they attack you? I'm saying no. It's what you believe and what you think, how you respond. That's what you can control. And that's what we want to focus on, because that's the spiritual journey for you to be on your Wu Wei life lesson. That's what Wu Wei means, to be in your flow. And so this is a kind of, I don't know whether it's radical, but it's different to what it's certainly different. For instance, I went to university and I was taught and lectured on sit in front of clients and ask them, how does that make you feel? Let's discuss your feelings. Let's go deeper into your feelings. Okay, come back next week and we'll talk about your feelings again. And I found very quickly that all I was on, they pulled me onto their carousel and I was going around, and what they were actually doing is trying to dump the emotions as onto me. And this is what we've got to stop. And so the experience of the emotion is your starting gate. That's where you start.
And also, David, I just want to say, you mentioned love is a positive emotion, therefore it's welcome. But I also think that in small measures, negative emotions can be helpful. So if
as long as you know you create them.
If we create a fleeting experience of anger or fear or frustration, then they are also helpful signposts to know that something is amiss here, either within what I'm thinking and believing, or in the behavior or the situation I'm in that needs to be addressed. Something needs to be addressed.
And the definition is really important that we focus on this, Alex, because the definition, as you said, even a negative emotion like fear, there's nothing wrong with fear as long as you do not become the victim of fear.
Yeah, and live your life through fear.
Exactly.
And make every choice and decision as a fear-based decision. Yeah.
So, fear, anger, whatever, you're in control of it and you can use it to the way that keeps you in your flow.
Okay, so step one then, in terms of this connection with the inner child, we've said in most emotional situations, when we experience a red light feeling, that feeling is being created by our inner child. So the first point of connection with the inner child is acknowledging the feeling. So don't dismiss it, don't ignore it, don't say, oh, this is a terrible thing, this is so unwanted.
Or I'm weak, or I'm oversensitive, or I'm hypersensitive, or I can't deal with life, or poo me, I'm not good enough, and then you're on the carousel.
And then we become obsessed by the feelings and emotions, and we're not doing this work with the inner child to get down to the root cause. So we acknowledge the feeling, I'm experiencing this physiological feeling within me now. It's uncomfortable. It's painful.
Mm-hmm.
So that's step one.
That's step one.
Step two then, David.
So step two is now you're going to do the golden thread. Now you're trying to reverse engineer, if you like. You want to go down to where this began. So the words that I would use, but you can use your own words. You could ask yourself, again, you can do this to yourself. You don't need to do it with anybody else. This is going to be you're going to experience some pushback here. Why do I choose to create this red light feeling? You see? Now, right away, you think, well, I'm not choosing it. Why would I choose it?
It's just happening.
It's just happening. It's there. Me see.
Response.
Now, this is what I say. And a little tip I said on the last one, let me repeat it. When you're doing the golden thread, do not ever say, I feel. Ban the F word. Say, I think, I choose, I believe. So rather than saying, oh, this is terrible, why do I choose to create this red light feeling?
So what you're saying is, what is the reasoning behind it?
Yes.
So something going on in my mind, in my beliefs, that is causing me to create this. This may be a valid response or it may be an imbalanced response, but let's just look a little bit deeper. That's what you're saying.
Yes.
And when we answer that question, so now are we now talking to our inner child?
We're now talking
when we
to the
ask
inner
that
child.
very first question.
Very first question.
We are now talking to our inner child.
That's why you'll get that. And you may have got it as you listened to me. Did you get it?
Yeah.
That's the inner child.
Yeah, because the inner child's like, hold on a minute, you're blaming me? And it's them.
Exactly.
It's them, it's their behaviour.
And then the inner child might go into a sulk. You're always blaming me. You see, I always get blamed. And if you got that first response, hello, darling, that's your inner child. You just, on one question, you got your inner child engaged. Now they're going to kick off.
Okay. So we ask the inner child, why are you choosing to create this? Yes. And we're not asking that question in a harsh way. We're not asking it in a chastising way. No. We're not asking it in a dismissive way or a negatively judgmental way. This is where we are now genuinely interested because we want to know.
That's the term, Alex.
We want to know what the problem is with the inner child.
Let's just focus on that one statement. Genuinely interested.
Yeah.
That's the key. So as you say, we're not chastising, we're not showing off, we're not embarrassing, we're not belittling, any other word that you can think of. We are genuinely interested. And I would always put in a nice, okay, son, okay, darling, why are you choosing to create this intense feeling? Why are you choosing to create this red light?
And all the time now, this is an inner dialogue we are having with ourselves.
Now you're talking to the inner child.
So it's almost like when we are asking the questions, we are almost like, for me, it's like visualizing in my mind, I am now the parent, the spiritual parent, the authentic parent, the adult parent to that little child within me that's stuck, that's fearful, that's angry, that's concerned, all of those emotive terms. And when I answer the question, I then, in my mind's eye, I put myself into the part of my mind that is that young child, me as a 6, 7, 8, 9-year-old, whatever age that you believe your inner child is, approximately, doesn't have to be. An answer, I guess we're looking for an answer that doesn't have to be like an adult answer. It doesn't have to be a well-formed, well-considered answer. It just needs to be the first thing that comes into our mind. And it could be answered in a way a child would answer as well.
Okay. So that's absolutely right.
Yeah.
Well role-played. Well role-played. Shall I tell you what the normal answer would be?
I feel.
I feel.
Yeah. So when we ask...
why have you chosen to create that red light?
Because, David, I feel... I feel hurt.
Exactly.
So the inner child will want to stay... So
the inner child will want to take you back
onto the
feeling.
Yeah.
There's the carousel.
So this is the little tweak we have to do.
Yes.
So we want the inner child to speak. We don't want to manipulate the inner child, or we don't want to constrain it too tightly. but we need to give it almost some ground rules
Yeah.
to communicate.
Yeah.
Again, not because we're trying to be harsh or overly disciplined with it, but because we genuinely want to get to the bottom of this problem. We
Yes.
genuinely want to get to the bottom of its concerns.
Yes. And the inner child will want you to take away the feeling, and
Yeah.
you can't.
As its priority.
As its priority. So the answer to the first question, why did you create the red light feeling? It will give you another feeling. Well, I'm scared. I'm frightened. Well, I'm jealous. Well, I'm hurt. Well, I'm upset. Well, this. And then you say, no, I don't want to know what you feel, darling. This is how I would do it. I don't want to know how you feel, sweetheart. I want to know what you think. What is it you didn't like? What is it that's upsetting you? What is it that you are pushing back against?
That's making you angry or frustrated.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's the golden thread. Again, genuinely interested. This is where a lot of my clients fall down, is they get really almost lose patience very quickly because the inner child tricks them and puts them back to the feeling.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of the blocks, if you like, that the inner child may start to put up at this stage, because frankly, you've never spoken to the inner child like this before.
No.
For people starting out doing this inner child work, they may have spent their whole lives placating the inner child, trying to soothe its emotions with that like kind of elastoplast effect, which never lasts very long, or just ignoring the inner child, pushing it to one side, saying, I don't want to listen to you. So for the very first time we start to have this conversation with our inner child, the inner child will be like, I don't like this. I don't like this at all.
Because it's unknown.
Yeah.
And it's not familiar.
Yeah.
So remember what we said on the first one. The inner child dislikes the unknown because it's not quite sure where it's going to go. And normally at this stage, it doesn't trust you. So therefore now the inner child will be very stubborn. The first time, second time you do this, the inner child will dig their heels in. They will want to talk about feelings. They may even cry. You may even feel anger, frustration, resentment. You now as the parent have not got to react to those feelings because the inner child's generating those feelings for you to give up.
Yeah.
That's what it wants. For you to go, oh, this is too much. Oh, I can't be bothered. Oh, my goodness. This is too much like hard work. That's what the inner child wants, because then it carries on its own way.
So it will want to continue to focus on the emotions rather than giving you the reasons why it's experiencing or creating the emotions.
Yes.
What is it thinking? What's its logic? Mm-hmm. The other things it will do...
The famous thing it says, I don't know why.
Yeah. So when we ask the question, why are you creating the emotion of anger, or why are you creating the emotion of sadness?
I don't know why.
I don't know. I just don't know.
I just don't know. I just don't know.
And again, because it's trying to block you. Because it doesn't really want to have this conversation with you.
No. Third one.
Well, the third one, the one that happens to me is that all of a sudden I get very tired.
Yes.
I start, and it's crazy because it's like we're talking about an internal dialogue, but physiologically, as you say, the inner child can start to create more of the same red light emotions, so you can get more frustrated, more angry with yourself, more fearful, or as it does for me, I start all of a sudden start yawning. I start getting very tired. I'm like, oh, I'm too tired to do this work now. I'm too tired to have this conversation now. And then I give up. Mm-hmm. And again, that's my inner child saying, oh, this is not a conversation for now. We'll do it another time. But then you never do it another time.
Fourth one.
You tell me.
Blames other people. It's not me. Why are you blaming me? It's them. It's you. You should deal with it better. Yeah. You shouldn't let anybody walk over you. They treat you like a doormat. And so it's always looking to put the blame outside.
So would that be if we say to our inner child, why are you creating the emotion of fear?
It's not me.
it's because they are doing this to me.
Exactly, it's them.
But-
It's them. They are do. If they didn't act that way,
Yeah.
if they only acted fairly, that's all I want. I only want people to be just. I only want people to play the game. They don't do that. Look what they do. They promise me one thing and then they do something else. You see, so all of the time. On the fourth one, it's putting the blame outside of themselves.
And I can see how we could do that as a default, but I can also see that in some situations, David, the other person or the situation there is genuinely a problem there. So isn't it important and right that the inner child points that out to you as part of this conversation?
We're not asking it now. We're just asking it, why have you chosen to create the red light feeling?
Okay, so rather than say, I'm creating the red light feeling because of what she said to me.
Okay, then we can ask. We can ask the next step of the golden thread.
Is what?
The next step is, why do you react to what she says to you?
Why am I creating the red light feeling?
Yes, for what she said to you.
And what you're suggesting is that we can still respond without creating the emotion.
Or you can create the emotion. I'm asking you, why are you choosing? That was the top question.
Yeah. Why am I
choosing?
And I guess my inner child would say something like, because how dare they say that, or that's totally inappropriate, or that's totally unjust or unfair or rude or whatever.
Okay. So now you start to say, let's just use one of those. You said it's inappropriate. Okay, sweetheart. So what do you do when someone else acts inappropriately?
Well, my inner child would normally just kick up a fuss and create emotions, and then I'd be the one who'd end up feeling bad for something someone else has done.
Exactly. And there's the life lesson.
And so what do we need? We need to teach our inner child at this stage?
We need to teach their inner child. My life lesson on that is, what other people think of you is none of your business. Because what she's saying, in my language, once we did a little bit more work on this, I know it's difficult for you to role play, but what she's saying is, what she does or what she says about me is important to me, and that's where she's getting her value from.
Yeah.
So she's looking outside of herself for value.
Yeah.
And we would have to teach her on that lesson of value and worth. So that would be the life lesson. But you see now, if that was right, and we see how quickly we can do it. I mean, we could do it even quicker than that. Once you get, we're talking about a couple of minutes. Now you're getting down to what the problem is. I think it's about worth and value, not about what she said. Now, if you spent all your life worrying about what other people said, you're not dealing with the real issue about your worth and value. Where do you get your worth and value from? And how do you maintain your worth and value? So what the golden thread has done is taken you down. You've reversed engineered, nothing to do in your example, what she said, what she didn't say, how she acted. It's more about what we've got to sort out is about how you value yourself and how you have your worth. And that's what you would work on the inner child with.
And as all part of this process, again, we are still acknowledging that the other person's behavior may have been appropriate.
Absolutely.
The situation that the inner child is concerned about may be extremely challenging or imbalanced.
Absolutely.
But we are now, I guess what we're trying to do as part of this process is take control of the things that we can control.
Exactly.
Which are our emotions, our thoughts, and our beliefs, and how we authentically respond.
Exactly, Alex. So let's just widen that. Let's just make something up. Let's say this lady who's acting inappropriately is your boss.
Yeah.
And she's inappropriate. You creating a red light is not going to help you
deal authentically
with her. But if it is about your value, if you spend some time, a few days, increasing your value, understanding what your value is, where you get your value from, how you manifest value, then when you go and speak to her, you're not speaking to her from a weaker position. You're speaking to her from a position of authenticity. You're speaking to her from a position of strength. You're speaking to your boss, this lady boss who's acted inappropriately, from a much stronger position, because you haven't got that internal angst going on inside of your body. You're more focused, you're calmer, your voice is different. The way she responds, the way you respond is totally different, because you're not working from an emotional basis. You're working from a basis of you have equal value to her.
Okay, and I'm wondering, David, that I can see how the connection process and the reparenting process that you've just described there, it moves us from the inner child's emotions, and we're not simply just placating or comforting the inner child. We're digging deep using the golden thread process technique to get down to the core issue. And that gives us that deeper level of understanding. And when we get down to the core issue, is it almost like we're saying to the inner child, thank you for bringing that to my attention.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing with me your thoughts and your concerns.
Yes.
And do we now, as
That's
the
acknowledgement.
acknowledgement,
Yes.
do we now say, right, I'll now look after you. I'll now act on your behalf. Leave this with me. Trust me. And then we go forward, whether it's first of all doing the inner work with ourselves, checking in on how we value ourselves. Do we doubt ourselves? And we've done so many other teachings on topics such as this, the 3 lies we hold within ourselves. I'm not good enough. I'm not lovable. I can't cope. If we get down to any of those 3 lies, we now, as the spiritual parent, the authentic adult, we take responsibility for doing that inner work.
Yes.
And then we take responsibility also from the inner child to go and deal with the situation. So whether it's the boss, whether it's a romantic partner.
So you do the work first, though,
do the work first.
before you go and address. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it would be like if you had a physical child and the child's about 6 or 7, or she's about 6 or 7, and she comes home from school one day and she says, I'm not good enough. You wouldn't say, "Oh, well, that's all right, darling. Do you want a cup of tea?" You would say, "What? What do you mean?
Mm-hmm.
You're not good enough?" You wouldn't just accept it. "Oh, Mum, I can't cope." You wouldn't say, "Well, that's right, darling. You probably can't cope the rest of your life." It's nonsensical. You're laughing when I say that, but that's exactly what you say to your inner child, and that's where it goes wrong, because that's then confirmation bias to the inner child then begins to believe that, and then that becomes familiar, as we spoke before, the carousel of despair, because the inner child's very comfortable on this, I'm not good enough, I'm unlovable, I can't cope, and that becomes the mantra that they're saying.
And so to do this, to have this internal conversation with ourselves and our inner child, between the authentic adult, the Shen part of our mind, and that inner child part of our mind. That 2-way conversation. Obviously, this is the work that you do one-to-one with your clients,
Yes.
where they speak on behalf of their inner child and you speak almost as the adult, trying to get to the root of the problem with them and to help them sort it out. But this work, as you said, can be done by yourself.
Yes.
Now, I know you've mentioned you can do this work, have this inner conversation, almost like in a quiet meditation with yourself.
That's what I personally do.
Yeah.
And I always like to put the little kind of note on the meditation. Don't go into the idea you've got to sit cross-legged or mantras. Meditation for me is 10, 15 minutes a day, focusing your mind, just being focused. So genuinely interested in what the inner child is saying, learning the techniques, because make no mistake, your inner child is very clever and he or she will get you back onto the emotions like that.
Yeah.
And that takes a lot of skill. I think my only skill as a therapist is to spot those and to keep the inner child going down the golden thread to get to the core belief. Because if you can get to the real core belief, what's that old saying? All roads lead to Rome. You've got to get to that core belief, because a lot of problems all come back. If you reverse engineer it, comes back to the same thing. Normally no more than 2 or 3 basic misunderstandings, I call them lies, in the belief system that you've got to correct. but I would call it through a meditation. But as you quite rightly said, like previously, it doesn't have to be a meditation. If you don't like that idea, a lot of our clients like writing journals. So this could be another way that you could do it. You could put on one page what the inner child says, on the other page what you say, and you could go down the golden
Like
thread.
a question and answer
Like
process, automatic writing.
Absolutely.
And again, just to do that in small doses, so
Yes.
10, 15 minutes a day. Because I think when clients work with you, it's almost like they're fast tracking the process.
Yes.
You can do that in a dialogue journey very quickly with them, almost in one, definitely in one session to get to the nub of the issue. But also, if they're doing it by themselves, it's a very empowering process. But to place reasonable expectations on themselves. This is the first time you're doing this, maybe 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years, the first time you've tried to open up a conversation with your inner child. To just set aside 10, 15 minutes a day. So it doesn't have to be a full conversation from emotions to conclusions, but just to almost get into the habit of opening up a dialogue. And if you reach a stumbling block, of course, you can pause and restart. But the idea is you must be consistent and go back and start again tomorrow.
That's very important, Alex. So when I work with a client, what I do, if they want to do it, I let them record the session. So they record the session on their machine, their computer, and I go through the process. And as you say, it's like speed dating. I go through it much quicker. But then what they have a session, and I do an hour and a half, or 2 hours. They have a session then that they can go away and listen to. And that becomes their meditation for the next month or 2 months. And that's how long it can take, is to work through the things I am saying. And when they get the resistance, I always say, stop the tape. Now think about, why am I resisting this? What is it I do not agree with? What is it I need to change? Because that process is the coming together, is the healing or the work or the realignment or the rebalancing, or what I would call Wu Wei. You're bringing the inner child out from the wing and you're bringing them into to the team that you're working together. So there's no inconsistencies. And that's why I say it should be based on Shen, truth, honesty, and integrity. That's the key. Can I sit? I often say to my clients, if you book another session in a few weeks or a month's time, and when you've gone through it, can you say, this is what I believe, and this is why I believe it? So there's an honesty there. So there's no separation between what you think and what the inner child thinks. And that is the golden thread and the healing or the coming together of the inner child, that you haven't got this inconsistency. Now, I use the word a lot when I'm trying to describe the power of Shen, is integrity. And I used to say to my clients when they said, well, what do you mean by integrity, and describe that? I used to say, walking the walk and talking the talk. And I think that's a good explanation. But now I say, think about the opposite to integrity, hypocrisy, saying one thing and then doing something else. And that's what you've got to try and avoid, that you think one thing, but your inner child thinks something else, because that's hypocritical.
Yeah.
And you've got to bring those two together. And that's what the golden thread will highlight. So using your role play, why is it that you are creating a red light about what she says? What are you doing that for? And then you go down and you dig down and you dig down until she said, well, I need her to validate me, for instance. You could have said
I
that.
don't like it when my boss criticizes me because I believe I'm not good enough.
Exactly.
Or I can't manage. And it's kind of triggering that belief.
Okay, and then you'd focus on, so why do you believe you're not good enough, darling? Now we do the golden thread again. So why do you believe you're not good enough?
And every time, with every question, we're digging a little bit further.
Going down a
to
little bit deeper. And then it will normally go down to that time period around 6 or 9, not every time, but normally goes down. And it will normally be what my father said, what my mother said, what my grandparents said, what a teacher said, what I perceived. They may not have said it, but how you perceived it. And that's where you do the healing. That is where you do the education. That is when you help your child, because it's like a child of 6 or 7 years old believing that something is wrong with them. And that's when you make the difference. And then it's like a row of dominoes. It goes right back up the line, and then you can clear that line out completely. So when you do speak to your boss, you're speaking to her from a position of value, of worth, of calmness, of spiritual oneness, and you can deal with the situation much more authentically, much more in Wu Wei.
Brilliant. Thank you, David. And we've also done a long form teaching on the Wu Wei Wisdom approach to integrity. So I will put a link in the show notes to that as well. So next week's teaching, part 4 of our mini series, we'll be looking at inner child types. So when you begin to do this work, for the first time you connect to your inner child, you find it very difficult to spot or identify what is the characteristic of your inner child. Am I actually talking to my inner child here? So we want to put a little bit more meat on the bones as to what is the inner child and how to recognize it. Is it just one inner child? Or some people say, if I got multiple inner childs going on here, to give you a little bit more clarity on that. So please do tune in for next week's teaching. If you have enjoyed this teaching, please do let us know, and perhaps share it with someone else who you think may also benefit. David works one-to-one with clients all over the world every week by Zoom video call on inner child work and inner child healing issues. If you are interested in learning more about David's consultations, I will also put a link in the show notes to those as well. And finally, please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We produce new teachings every week, and we would love to share your journey with you. Bye-bye.